visionary, a scientist who invented the communications satellite, the writer of 2010, and now in retreat in Sri Lanka, the visionary who ponders the riddles of this and other worlds.
A few years ago, the people who live in this house reported an extraordinary series of events. Household objects moved around, and one observer saw a loaf of bread rise slowly in the air and hurtle across the room. Naturally, the family was scared and had no idea what was going on. But to any student of the paranormal, this spelt poltergeist. Poltergeist is a German word which means noisy spirit, but that's very much of an understatement. Poltergeists are the original things that go bump in the night. When there's a poltergeist in the house, there are strange bangings and crashings, furniture moves around, stones fall out of the blue, machinery goes haywire, all without any apparent physical cause. No wonder that, for centuries, poltergeists have spread alarm and controversy throughout the world.
Thornton Road, Birmingham. It's not the quiet suburban neighbourhood it seems. 5 of these houses are under siege. Night after night, rocks rain down on them. The bizarre bombardment has lasted more than 6 years. Glass in every window has been shattered, forcing the residents to erect barricades to protect their homes. The stones seem to come from nowhere, yet the damage they do is real enough, not just to the buildings, but to the householders' nerves and bank accounts.
We've had all the panes but 2 go on the garage, which are the big panes. I think they're about 14 foot, with reinforced glass, which cost nearly £700 to be replaced. And we have since they've been replaced and the wire netting's been put up. We've had another 4 panes go now.
Most of the windows on the veranda have been broken. Over £500 worth has been put in there. Various other windows have been cracked. And we have now wired all those windows and have been wired for nearly 12 months.
Birmingham's police confess they're stumped. In charge, Chief Inspector Len Turley.
When I first came here some 12 months ago, I thought at that stage that I would put 2 policemen on it and it would be finished in a couple of days. That has proven to be totally wrong.
The case has all the hallmarks of a poltergeist outbreak. Its eeriest feature is the way the rocks seem to come out of the blue. In vain, the police have combed the gardens for vandals. No human being seems to be throwing the stones. Yet the stakeout goes on in Thornton Road, night after night.
At this stage, we've probably wasted somewhere in the region of 3,500 man-hours in observations and inquiries in the Thornton Road area. The backs of these 4 houses in Thornton Road are virtually a battleground.
And clues are hard to come by.
This is a selection of the stones. This one is about average size. As you can see, it is quite a hefty stone. It's a pebble. It looks as if it's come from a seashore, but it hasn't. The gardens of these houses in this area are all have these pebbles in them. The interesting thing about this and all the others that we've had is everyone appears to have been washed or scrubbed. None of them contain any dirt at all. We have had police officers lying, standing, hiding themselves from 6 p.m. in the evening until 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning in all kinds of weather. They have been on top of roofs of adjoining properties, and in all these occasions, the only thing we can say is at certain times, police officers have heard what they say appear to be stones striking the roof or the back of houses. In none of the occasions when we've been doing observations have we seen anybody.
It's as though somebody's watching you, actually going up into a room and drawing the curtains, and you get stones come over as soon as you seem to appear at the window. It's uncanny, really, because it's just as though somebody's focused on you all the time.
I don't really know what's going on down here. This has been going on for a period of 18 months. And we haven't got a clue who's doing it at all.
Already this year, we have arrested 1,997 criminals. We have solved, in the time we have doing this inquiry at Thornton Road, we have recorded and solved 5 murders, 2 of which have been extremely complicated, and the inquiry was very protracted. And we've used the same expertise on our stone throwings as we have on these other incidents, and we're still no farther forward with the stone throwings.
KVOA-TV of Tucson, Arizona, reported a similar pelting poltergeist in 1983.
Richard Birkbigler and his family are virtual hostages in their home. For 60 days, ever since they moved into this isolated area on Tucson's east side, they've been bombarded by rocks thrown by an unknown attacker from the deep brush surrounding the house.
It goes on every night for the last 7 weeks, and the last 2 weeks of the, well, for 9 weeks, and the last 2 weeks has been night and day.
The sheriff's department says it has been unable to find any trace of the alleged attacker. But while the search goes on, the Birkbiglers live in fear.
A poltergeist apparently rampaged through a house in Swansea in 1965. The furniture was flung about and objects shot through the air, according to householder Mrs. Howell.
I went out the back kitchen, and as I opened the door, this bottle came flying towards me. And, of course, I shut the door to protect myself. I opened it again, and I seen this other bottle. So I just picked up the children, and I ran out the house. As I ran out, my husband was coming down the street here, and he ran straight in the house, and by the time he got in there, all the place was turned upside down. It was terrible. The couch, the TV, everything just thrown in the middle of the room. I went upstairs, and when I got upstairs, the bedroom was all upside down. The little boy's cot was underneath the bed. He would have been killed. And even the police, they had to break into the bedroom before they got there. They haven't got any explanation for it at all, because, as I said, it couldn't be nothing human, because how could it get out of the front bedroom down to the kitchen when the police had to break in?
A poltergeist was apparently photographed in action in Teresa Costa's kitchen in France in 1955. And a poltergeist was blamed for ransacking a house in Abbott Road, Bournemouth in 1981. Food and wrecked furniture were strewn everywhere. Romanian teenager Eleonora Zugun claimed she was attacked by a poltergeist that bit and scratched. Inflamed wheals apparently swelled up on her body before the eyes of investigators in the 1920s. 50 years later, reports of a factory poltergeist caused mayhem in Manchester.
The work here at night has to stop. And quite simply, the trouble is that the men are far too scared to be in these warehouses during those night hours.
The funny thing is, the steel object, weighing maybe a pound, flies at an aluminium panel, and there's never a dent, never a scratch.
A force of energy. It's like willing a piece of metal or something from one point to another. It just seems to lift itself and fly.
From this pub in Barnsley, Yorkshire, came tales of a playful poltergeist. In 1965, Michael Collindridge was in bed with tonsillitis. He'd been given a walking stick to rap for attention. One day, he swore it took off and waltzed round the room. To the press, the dancing stick was a psychic wonder, and Michael will never forget how the astonishing antics began.
Suddenly I was aware that the stick was moving along the top of the bed. It sounds quite incredible, but the top of the stick was just moving backwards and forwards.
The Cranberries regulars still muse on the mystery.
You actually went up the wall and operated like a pendulum, left and right, you know.
You still go backwards and forwards on top of the bed. And then you'd come up and stand on top of the bed. and it used to tap on top of safe, and it used to play tunes. And different people went up and asked it to play different tunes. And the tunes were recognisable.
The one that I noticed was Jingle Bells.
You used to tap 2 for no and 1 for yes, or something like that. So I asked it, and they were all asking it questions, they were tapping, so I says to it, I says, what's his favourite going to win first race tomorrow, like, you know? But no damn.
X-rays at the local hospital revealed nothing. No secret devices for conjuring tricks. But Michael was kept under close observation.
I can remember someone saying, oh, you know, will you take your hands out from under the covers? Which I did. I think actually just one hand was under the covers. Put my hands on the bed and the stick continued to move around. I then sat up. And I can remember that, sort of being sat up in bed with this sort of stick behind me there, still moving.
Well, I stood fascinated watching it, thinking of trickery, but I saw no sign of trickery.
I think, as far as one can say, it was some sort of spiritual influence of some sort or other, which was possibly attached to Michael rather than the stick itself.
And one day, me and my father went up with strip-top bed. No wires, nothing. But I still think Michael was doing it. Did you used to do it, Michael?
No, I didn't. Nothing to do with me at all.
Well, that was a good one. That was a good one.
The attitude of any serious researcher towards poltergeist should be one of open-minded skepticism. Fraud is always a possibility, and sometimes the culprit gets caught red-handed.
In this woman's house near Zurich, something was smashing the china. She called in researchers who left their video camera running, unknown to her 10-year-old daughter.
Das ist da gestanden, das Brünnli. Sag so, Brigitte.
To the mother, it looked like the work of a poltergeist. And the case might never have been solved if the real culprit hadn't been captured on tape.
Some investigators have tried to explain poltergeists by natural causes. And there's one extraordinary case where the explanation was, quite literally, down to earth.
Wisbeach, Cambridgeshire. In 1979, residents of the Mount Pleasant estate were alarmed by inexplicable bangings and rumblings, the terrifying trademarks of the poltergeist.
There was that layer, there was making the glass vibrate in the house itself.
After 2 or 3 days, it was getting quite bad. So much so, in fact, that you could feel the paving stones underneath your feet actually vibrating and scraping together. The manhole covers, you could hear them rattling, and in the house, you could actually see the ornaments on the mantelpiece moving.
I have black brass plates and there's ornaments. We were sat there watching the telly, and they started to shake at first, and then they just, one by one, started to fall off shelves and off of the wall, you know, and you thought, Craigie, whatever's going on here, you know, it just weren't natural.
We didn't really know what it was. I mean, it could have been earthly spirits, if you like, something rearing up underground. We just didn't know what it was, you see. And if you don't know what something is, then it is unnerving, isn't it?
I mean, these sort of things don't happen every day, you know, things just flying off walls and movements from underfoot, you know, it was eerie. It really was.
But the real cause was reassuringly unparanormal. An air relief valve had failed in the main sewer.
Effectively, the air was trapped in the rising main and was, in fact, moving up and down the rising main, causing the tremors. This would be similar to a central heating system. Air gets trapped in, the pipes rattle. You imagine that in pipes of this size, effectively you've got 10 or 20 times greater noise as well.
and the pipe ran directly under the road where our houses were, and that was their explanation. It was just this sewage pipe.
Elsewhere in Cambridgeshire, they've found poltergeists aren't always so easy to explain.
A gentleman brought out a very plausible theory a number of years ago about geophysical forces underground hitting a house and making things shake, you see. Vibrations go up the wall, hat boxes are thrown off, tables are displaced, vases suddenly move, and people are sitting in this house and they don't realise that it's due to underground water running underneath, or disused drains, or seismic disturbance, or something of that nature. Geophysical forces.
Tony Cornell is testing whether such forces can create effects that could be mistaken for poltergeists.
Right, we'll just mount this up here. Down a bit, down a bit.
Engineer Scott Steedman fixes a powerful vibrator to the wall to shake the house just like an earth tremor.
Down a bit, down a bit. This whole house probably weighs about 100 tons.
Yes.
So that a normal earthquake, well, a good-sized earthquake that really would probably do some serious damage to this house, would put perhaps 20 or 40 tons horizontally on this house.
On the mantelpiece, household objects are carefully positioned, the sort of things that fly about during poltergeist outbreaks.
We can really shake the house properly. So if anything is going to happen, it's going to happen like this.
Right, so shall I go upstairs and have a look?
I think it's a good idea.
Righto. Right, now if we come up the stairs here, you see the traditional wardrobe with a hat box has not been thrown off. The idea was that you've got a vibration up the wall and it threw the box off. Nothing's moved there. This hasn't moved, the cup hasn't moved. The plate, sorry, the tin tray balanced on one nail, which is very precarious. That hasn't moved at all. Nothing has come off. Take it up higher.
We're running over 100 hertz.
Well, there's a low vibration.
About 120 hertz.
I can feel it through my feet.
Well over 10 tons going in and out of this wall 100 times a second.
The typical poltergeist effect at the expense of a cup is it doesn't just drop like that. It flies, smashes, you see. But nothing. We're getting nothing like that at all.
Tony, what can you feel up there?
I can feel it through my feet, but there's nothing moving.
Well, it is a local effect. I mean, it's very local in that wall.
Yeah.
Right, let's wind it up a bit faster.
Yes, that's much.
Only when the machine's really racing, virtually shaking the house to destruction, do things start to fly.
Here we come. Hey!
We'll get a nice...
But the artificial earthquake has produced nothing remotely resembling the effects of a poltergeist.
I think the geophysical theory, as pronounced several years ago, is dead as an explanation for poltergeist. That's my view.
I've always been fascinated by poltergeist stories. Almost against my will, I've been compelled to take them seriously because they show certain recurrent features. Often, but not always, there's a disturbed adolescent somewhere in the background. Now, as all parents know, adolescents can raise plenty of hell without paranormal aid. Nevertheless, this persistent feature over many centuries and in many cultures suggests that something strange may be going on.
In the winter of 1967 in Rosenheim, southern Germany, chaos descended on a lawyer's office. Every piece of equipment suddenly went crazy. Herr Adam, the lawyer, and engineer Herr Brunner were caught up in the strange events.
And they fell down. And there were glass splinters everywhere. And once I had a fluorescent light installed. Up there? And it rotated too. Even when it was on the floor, it rotated. It exploded once. Through there? Yes, then do you remember that painting, oil painting? Yes. Yes, she was sitting there, making photocopies. I was standing here in the corner, and in front of my very eyes, the picture rotated.
Here there was a metal cash box. The drawer was like this, and the metal cash box flew out at a right angle to the wall.
It clattered out.
Hurled across the room.
Oh, yes.
And the money was scattered all over both rooms.
That's terrible.
Hundreds of telephone calls were made to the speaking clock, 0119. dialed at impossible speed, on one occasion 9 calls in 2 minutes, according to the bill.
Here, for example, you can see a column headed 0119, one after the other 20, 30 times, a whole page.
The telephone company laboriously rewired the whole system, but the calls to the speaking clock went on. Professor Hans Bender, Germany's foremost parapsychologist, was summoned to Rosenheim. Soon he announced the cause of the trouble, the office junior, a teenage girl named Anne-Marie. She's now a settled housewife, but Bender believes she was the focus for a genuine poltergeist.
Well, very soon we realized it is a case of poltergeist, depending of Anne-Marie. When the girl was walking through the corridors, the lamps began to swing. We very carefully observed the swinging of the lamp. We did not notice the beginning, but the, amplitude was increasing without the presence of anyone. So there was a supply of force, and nothing happened when she was not present. It was a very clear case of poltergeist phenomena.
I must say I felt very humble. I was completely shocked. I must believe it. You could put it that way. I must believe it. But I did not want it to happen, That is true, but otherwise, I suppose I was the cause.
The most extraordinary phenomena, I think, are the telephone phenomena. I never observe it in other cases, and the interesting aspect of these telephone phenomena is that Anne-Marie, without having the slightest knowledge of the technical system of a telephone, seems to have acted on swings, and so produced unconsciously these calls for time, 0119, and this for weeks, and sometimes 4 times, 5 times in a minute. And the motivation may have been, when can I go home?
Not at all. I'm no different from anybody else.
Is it possible that adolescents can possess powers which they lose in later life? I think it's very unlikely, but I don't think it's completely impossible.
Is it superhuman or supernatural to be able to walk on hot coals and emerge unscathed? Arthur C. Clarke's back after the break, Walking on Fire.